Welcome to the last session of the show, day 2 here at Sustainability Live. And today we're going to be discussing racing towards EV, which is obviously about EVs. And we're going to be talking about Formula E as well. Joining me are Miguel Valldecabres Polop, CEO of EV Dynamics. I hope I did a decent job there, Miguel.
You did indeed.
Thank you. Miguel established QEV Technologies, an engineering company specialising in field of electromobility, which includes design and construction of electric vehicles and the infrastructure required for those as well. In 2020, he joined QEV Tech's main production supplier, EV Dynamics, as CEO, to lead the transformation and internationalisation of the company. Also joining us is Hannah Brown, and she serves as Formula E's Chief of Staff, where she's responsible for supporting the strategic direction of the company and operational oversight of functions including communications, people, sustainability, analytics and insight. Now previously, Hannah spent 10 years at Sky, during which she secured sports rights for Sky Sports, led investments in new sports ventures and supported the management of Sky's joint venture portfolio. So please welcome your panel. Now, Miguel, there's been a huge push for electrification, certainly when it comes to cars, and reducing reliance on petrol and diesel. But how close do you think we actually really are to reaching 100% electrification on our roads?
Where?
Okay, well, let's start with the UK.
Okay. Because there are two worlds here. You go emerging markets or you go to UK. We are like very far away, still very far away. There's still lots of things to do. I think governments are doing the right policies to push and to stop IC internal combustion cars. But there's a lot to do still. And we see also in Europe a lot of subsidies being given and a lot of regulation going in the right direction. But I think there's a lot, there's a massive way to go still. We're far away from where we should be. Especially if you look at countries like Norway, you look at countries like China itself, South Korea, they really are pushing much faster than we are.
Absolutely. I think I saw a story last week that 2 out of every 3 new cars in Norway are electric cars that are sold, and China is the biggest producer. Correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, by the way. No, China is the biggest producer, and they sell more cars than the rest of the world combined, electric cars. I might have made that up, but I think that's correct. So Hannah, with the aim of cars becoming fully electric by 2040, for instance, what does this mean for the future of motor racing? It's quite high profile at the moment with Formula E as well. With Formula E, will that ever replace Formula 1, or do you think they might run in conjunction or parallel with each other?
Yes, I think it's a great set of questions. And I think, what we're seeing across the sports landscape more broadly is the role of sport to influence and use sport as a positive agent to inspire and excite the huge number of people that engage with sport week in, week out. And the reason why sport is powerful is it's live, it's appointment to view, people have to get involved. So when we talk about motorsport more broadly, I think it's, Miguel was involved in Formula, right at the very beginning of its story, in 2012-13 when they're getting the championship off the ground and when they first hit the racetrack actually in China in 2014. And the championship, just for those that are a little bit less aware, has just completed its 8th season of racing. So in sports terms, still an eye blink, albeit for everyone involved in the championship, I think a huge amount of hard work to get it to 8 seasons old. But I think, when you look at going back to the point around the commitment, the accelerating commitment we're seeing from organisations all over the world, including sports bodies, around sustainability. I think that's a hugely positive thing. I think in motorsport, Formula One, have realised, and I'm obviously not here to talk on behalf of Formula One, but I think, great that they are making strong moves and addressing, the reality that they represent the combustion engine, and what their responsibility or how they think that they can improve their own operations in terms of their impact on the climate and the messages that they portray. From Formula E's perspective, we are the only all-electric championship. We hold, from a single-seater perspective, we hold that exclusive license with the FIA through to 2039. And, when, Alejandro, our co-founder, said right at the beginning when it was launched, the world wasn't looking for another motorsport. There's plenty of great formats out there. He was, conversations with the FIA, realised that there was an opportunity around all electric. And go back to 2014, as we know we're still at the, we think we're at this kind of point in the S-curve, but we're still at the bottom of the, the graph, as, you're alluding to in terms of how far we've still got to go. And so you can imagine 2014, quite how far away we were. We were right back at the beginning bit, and everyone thought they were totally crazy. I think as we go forward to today, what we're seeing in terms of government regulation, corporate commitment, local regulation, both, so, global commitments, regional commitments, then what that means locally in each market. There's a great set of conditions around acceleration, and so we believe as a championship we have a unique role around creating exciting sport and how we create content and build heroes and stars and allow companies be those manufacturers of cars to people like our title sponsor ABB, who are going to be a huge part of the electrification of the infrastructure of the cities that impact large numbers of people in urban environments, like bringing those people together to allow them to tell a really powerful story through sport. So that's where we see our role, and our job as people that that put the championship together is to make that a really solid and influential platform for people to come enjoy watching us and be excited by us, and then all those other people that come together that get to showcase their capabilities through us.
And when we're talking about the technology here, so like Formula One has I was going to say track record, that's a terrible pun, but Formula One has a record of helping to pioneer technologies that then translate into commercial cars or street cars, if you like. Do you think that Formula E has a similar impact, or could have a similar impact, where technologies are developed and then, like with charging, for instance, or fast charging of cars, that could then be rolled out into a wider infrastructure for the public?
Well, indeed. If you really look at what FormulaE has done worldwide, I mean, there's a lot of ventures and enterprises that have been created thanks to FormulaE. So EV Dynamics is a good example of that. We produce electric minibuses, focus mostly on emerging markets, and that company really is kind of like a collateral damage out of FormulaE. And everything was done because FormulaE is acting really as an icebreaker. And there's a lot of bits. I mean, it's a small company still with like 600 people working on the whole circus. But you can, I mean, if you look at all the small, technology, not just software companies, but actually hardware companies and infrastructure companies being created thanks to FormulaE, and the network that FormulaE generates, it's amazing. By the way, and staff at FormulaE, the founders, the investors, I was one of the first investors as well, we don't even know. They don't even know. But it's generating a massive impact. And I don't think FormulaE is looking at Formula One. FormulaE is doing its own way, and it's generating, a massive trend, and it's creating an amazing platform and network for, creating new things and connecting people, and it's doing an amazing job. I mean,
and I think just to add to that, it's just really early days. So we're going to put the championships now race with two different cars. So one car in the first 4 years, second car will just come to the end of that 4-year cycle. New car will be on the track in 2023, so for season 9, and the FIA and a bunch of engineers are up at Williams right now, just outside of Oxford, really putting the new battery through its paces. Like, this is a battery that's going to do something that no battery has done before in terms of 600 kilowatts of power in and out of that thing, and delivering huge amounts of energy within the race. And this race car is going to generate 40% of the energy that it consumes during the race. It's going to generate itself during the race through the regeneration that will come off both the front and the rear wheel axles. So, this is everyone's going to be sitting on the edge of their seats from a championship level when that car lines up in Mexico City at the end of January next year, and we're going to be putting fast charge into the race in terms of a format, so the car stopping and us putting another 4 kilowatts of energy in, which in the great scheme of things over 30 seconds, isn't a huge amount of power for the amount of time, but technically is a huge challenge that what we're pushing that battery to do. So even that in its one example, FormulaE is pushing that technology to the edge, which at the moment the road car doesn't need to do that. But in doing that, it's not just the technological innovation around chemistry and physics, but it's people. And, you know, if you go, the Mercedes team have had a great run of success in FormulaE, and I think when you ask Mercedes, the Mercedes leadership, what they really value that they had out of the program is they've developed a whole team of people that, you know, were developing technology that's gone into their EQ program, and it's that kind of IP, intellectual capital, that they really value. So it's really at all parts of the value chain, from people right through to engineering and technology.
How big is the new battery pack of this Generation 3 car?
It's got 100 and the battery itself, I think, has got 120 cells. I'm looking at Charlie in case I get the
kilowatt hours, roughly?
So it's going to be about 3840.
3840.
And in terms of size, I was told on Monday it's going to have 120 cells, and each of those cells is about the size of an A5 piece of paper.
So that's equivalent to 5 liters of gasoline.
Yeah.
So if you compare FormulaE to Formula 1, because a lot of people tend to compare like you're doing now, I like to see a Formula 1 car with 5 liters of benzina and see how
far it goes.
How far it goes. So, I mean, it's a completely different story. Electric vehicles is about efficiency. Formula 1 is about, you know, top speed. But it's a completely different game. You give somebody 5 liters of equivalent to 5 liters of gasoline and say you do the race and you got 40 minutes and you got fuel an X amount of laps to complete, and you have to manage energy. Electric vehicles is about managing energy. Not just on FormulaE, but also when we do a lot of vans for public transportation, for delivery of goods and things like that. The driver has to manage the energy as well. So simply you don't need to push the brake. Literally, on an electric car, you can just stop accelerating and the vehicle will regenerate. So it's
like that.
Yeah.
Take your foot off the accelerator in the car.
But you can literally extend, well, not up to 40. I mean, FormulaE is pretty amazing, but normally on a regular car, you can extend your own, you know, range by 25, 30%, just by the way you drive. And I'm not a good driver, so I do burn a lot of electrons.
I can imagine you've got a heavy foot when it comes to driving.
Well,
yeah.
I think they've done a good job in the UK of, like, it's fuel prices obviously going to slow us all down on the road, but I was in the States for 3 years and I got back and very quickly accumulated quite a lot of points on my license, and I was like, there's a load more cameras here than there were when I left, so doing a good job of slowing us down. But I mean, the fact that this car is going to regenerate so much power, we're going to take off a set of brakes on the car, right? So it's no longer going to have one set of its hydraulic brakes. It'll only have front hydraulic brakes, not going to have rear hydraulic brakes. Hope I've got that the right way around. Like, that's actually quite scary for the drivers, like, if something happens with this braking system, like, one set's removed. And I think it's, you know, not just around the fuel that we burn, but especially when we think about targeting urban areas, particulate pollution is also a big factor. So, you know, I think Jaguar are really interested to see how that plays out when we're not degrading ceramic brakes, and we can massively reduce that too. So you never know, when we look forward to Gen 4, what will that car do? Maybe it's got no brakes at all. Maybe it's all braked off regen power. So yeah, definitely lots of interesting things. And I think, you know, we commercially, there's things that if there was no limit to the amount of money we could spend, there'd be things that we could do. There's a reality that we have to build a sustainable business, not only for our shareholders, but also for the racing teams. And so, you know, we create a controlled environment for them to operate so that they can also build their businesses. So it's not like perfect dynamics in terms of development, but I think there's some really interesting things going on.
Okay, let's widen the conversation here, because there might be people watching this or in the audience today who might be fleet managers, for instance, and they're thinking about how they can make the switch to EVs. But obviously that requires significant investment. So, Miguel, what resources are there for businesses looking to adopt EVs for their fleets?
Well, if they want to deliver goods within the cities, they have to go electric because they have to comply with regulation. So we tend to think that electric vehicles are more expensive than IC cars, and that's not true. You have a lot of cheap options on the market, and there is a lot of vehicles like, I don't know, not just commercial vehicles, but like regular vehicles produced by Kia. You have suppliers in China like BYD doing amazing solutions. And the problem is that Asia has a big demand, and we still don't get a lot of supply of those vehicles. But you have, you know, small vehicles, not long range. We don't really need long range. That's really something not needed, because the vast majority of the routes for regular people are under 20 miles. You don't really tend to drive that long. Maybe 1% of your trips are very long. So you don't really need big cars, and you got very cheap and reliable solutions like BYD. By the way, BYD has already surpassed Tesla in number of vehicles sold. That's the largest now company in China. So if we get those vehicles here, which I guess we will, if China stops swallowing all the production, then you'll see very cheap solutions here. And when it comes to companies, you have a lot of, I mean, Europe, globally in Europe, you got a lot of subsidies. So not just for vehicles, but also for infrastructure. The big problem is not how fast the companies can adopt, because I think companies will go electric yes or yes, especially with the petrol prices today. They save money. If you really calculate the electric car is more expensive or less expensive, you look at the amount of money you're spending on gas throughout the years, and normally, when I look at business plans, the vehicle pays itself just by the money you save on petrol. The big problem here is, the big challenge is whether the OEMs are going to be able to supply products. Like if you try to buy a Tesla, I'll bet you don't get a Tesla in less than 6 months.
You don't. I can testify to that.
Well, and that's the problem. Try to buy a white van, a small van, I mean a 6-meter van, and you don't have any. I mean, you can buy a Nissan NV200, which is a very small vehicle with a very small range. So the problem here is not how fast companies can do it. If you give them a solution, I mean, we are rich people, we are a rich country. Our companies have a lot of money. We just can't buy the product. You don't have, I mean, is there one dealership in the UK where you can just go today and take 10 vans? No, you don't have, literally, you don't have one single dealership that you can just buy. I mean, 7.5 meter, 6 vans that can take, 2 tons of load. You don't have them. It's not that easy. So the challenge is for the OEMs. And for some reason, they're slow. They don't have factories to produce batteries. They're just, maybe they have a strategy to just go a bit slower because they want to, depreciate those internal combustion investments and capex. But the challenge is on the OEMs, not on the companies. And that's my, unless you...
I think that's right. And I think, like supply, I mean, I'm not an expert in this. I just read what probably everyone in this room reads in terms of general press. But I mean, the supply chain issues around the parts that will go into these vehicles. I think there's 2 parts. One is the tradition. There's obviously the all-electric manufacturers, very clear on what their strategies and objectives are. There's the OEMs that have got clearly huge workforces and supply chain systems around internal combustion. And if you look in Germany, there's obviously big workforce and union pressure. Like, it's not just straight economics of those companies, it's also the political environment they operate in and impact on employment in certain countries where these vehicles are made. So it's complex for these bigger and older companies to switch their supply chains and make that work, not only around terms of supply of raw materials, but also how they set their company up. And it's interesting. A friend of mine just written a book on climate change, and he's travelled around the world looking at the impacts on various companies, and was out in the Congo and in cobalt mining. And there's a huge opportunity for some of these countries to become incredibly wealthy on their access to the raw materials required, for example, for batteries. And yet there's huge issues around corruption and who owns what and how those minerals are mined and done in a proper and sustainable way, and how they're shipped around and traded around the world. So it's super complicated. But the person I've kind of been following on LinkedIn is Mary Barra, who's CEO of General Motors, and in the last 6 or 7 months hasn't been a single post that she's talked about that hasn't been around their move to electric. So she's worth looking at her background. She's a long time at GM, has pretty much done every role in the organisation, from running shop floor to, her CV is incredible actually. But as I say, if you follow her on LinkedIn now and see what she's talking about, it's all about GM's move to electric.
Well, exactly. All these OEMs are making these proclamations as well. VW is the world's largest manufacturer of cars, right? And they're making the move as well. But I just want to come back to Miguel, talking about batteries and energy. I mean, the phrase we hear all the time in this country anyway, when people are discussing electric cars, is this whole range anxiety thing. And as you said, most journeys that we make are pretty short anyway, 20 miles, 20 kilometres. But obviously battery technology is getting better and better. but most electric vehicles still struggle to meet the range, I suppose, of their internal combustion engine counterparts. So how will EVs compete with fuel-powered cars in this area? Or when do you think we'll reach this tipping point where the battery technology is on a par or better than an internal combustion engine?
Well, I mean, I've been driving electric cars for quite a while. So I'm one of those, brave guys who bought a Tesla, I would say 4 or 5 years ago. I actually had the first Roadster. So, to be honest, I have an iPhone, and I have to charge my iPhone every 4 or 5 hours, and I got used to that. I don't need a 1 kilo battery pack, so I can charge my iPhone every week. So, of course, we need fast charging. We need DC charging infrastructure to be implemented. If you take a place like the UK, because America is a different story. They do commute interstate, so people, Americans are Americans, so they can just drive from New York to California. But we don't drive to Oslo from London, we're different. So it'll be fairly easy. They're very different, believe me. But here, it's a no-brainer, and you need, a battery pack is very heavy. A 100 kilowatt hour battery pack is 600 kilos. That's really heavy. And they don't burn brake pads, but the weight does eat a lot of tires. So in my opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, the vehicles should be light and have small battery packs that you can use on a daily basis. Maybe have a maximum of 150, 200 kilometers. And then there should be charging infrastructure available so that when you stop in the supermarket or different places that you go on a daily basis to your work, any garage should have an AC charger. And again, maybe once a year, twice a year, you just do a long trip, just rent a car, take the train, get a chauffeur, Uber. You got a big fleet of vehicles available for you. But for your daily routes, you don't need a long range. And I think that's like an excuse that people say, well, but the vehicle doesn't have a long range. Well, tell me where you went yesterday, and the day before yesterday, and the day before yesterday. Come on, you don't do 100 kilometers a day. It's ridiculous. You can't compare. It's a different story. We don't complain. Nokia was a longer, I don't know, look, I still have battery on my Nokia.
I'm charging 10 years.
Please, but come on, you can just charge your car everywhere. So, and by the way, when people is talking about, grid power, even if you have a small apartment and you live on a block, you still have like a 5 kilowatt contract with the utility company. And at night we normally sleep. We don't turn on lights or vacuums or things like that. So we don't use those 5 kilowatts. So even just with the power of the grid in the blocks, I'm not talking about houses with big power. So just with a very small contract that you have on your apartment, you have enough grid to just fill in 50, 60 kilowatt hours that's like 250 kilometers range. So even for people that does 200 kilometers, you don't need anything. You don't even need a charger. You can just plug it in your 5 kilowatt hour switch. Nothing. And the car will just charge on AC. And by the way, the battery doesn't even get damaged. And then those massive juice can be injected into the cars when you just commute. So if you have to go from here to Manchester, on the highway, there's got to be, the gas stations, stations where you can just plug in a massive power, not 600, that's a lot, but maybe 120, 180, 10 minutes, and then you have another 200 kilometers range. So, by the way, people that drives electric vehicles, they don't charge and just go all the way up. You normally just charge a little bit here, a little bit there. You just get used to just plug it in, And then you see a lot of companies that are going to make a lot of money by selling energy, like supermarkets. They sell lettuce and tomatoes, but they're going to sell energy because there is no space on the gas stations to actually put in all the cars. So you're going to get used to charge almost everywhere you go. And if you go to China, everywhere you go, every single parking spot, it has a plug-in. So you just plug it in and keep going. Just like you do on your phone when you just go on an Uber ride. You just plug it in. What? Why? You're only going to be 5 minutes on the way. Yeah, but I plug it in. I get a little 3, 4, 5%, keep going.
Well, that's the classic sort of chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Do you think that countries, and not just the UK, but countries in general, need to invest more in the infrastructure to then be able to convince people that EVs are the way forward?
100%. 100%. Because you can't rely on just people charging at home. There has to be public infrastructure. And that will probably just, release all the anxiety on people or reluctancy to buy electric cars. But it's not anxiety or reluctancy. People are just putting excuses. They're excusing themselves. And when people tells me 20 excuses why not to buy an electric car, I tell them, are you not conscious with your own planet? Okay, so everything, the range, it's more expensive, you don't have a place. Okay, fantastic. But we only have one planet. So don't make excuses. Buy an electric car. Yeah? Pay it on installments. You're going to pay. The car pays off, I tell you.
Oh, so what role does FormulaE have in this, do you think? How can FormulaE help develop infrastructure for electric cars around the world, potentially, or help to drive the innovation in battery technology like you're talking about, or the regen braking of 40%? Is this how FormulaE can help to drive the take-up of EVs in the wider public?
I mean, from are we going to go and electrify all the forecourts? No, we're not. But we're a marketing and storytelling platform for people to come and do that. So, for example, ABB are our title partner. They're actually a very old company and got 100,000 odd employees around the world, and probably open up your electrical box in your house and there'll be some ABB kit in there that you didn't know about. And I think they start off in the trains business, 60, 70 years ago. But anyway, it's an old business, but a bit like the likes of DuPont and a few others have done a very good job of how they keep iterating those capabilities into delivering solutions for new problems. And they're about to spin off, or they have just spun off. I think they've been mooting it, but it's going to happen imminently, is their electrification business is going to be listed on its own because it's such a valuable business for them going forward. So ABB and Shell have it's not a global exclusive deal, but a multi-territory deal for ABB to electrify the forecourts under the Shell Recharge brand in plenty of territories around the world, and actually Shell came and partners with us for our Berlin race, and they announced this partnership at the same time. And who knows, potentially there's some opportunity for that deal to get bigger in the future. But a really good example about how ABB have been a title partner of the championship for a few years. They would see their future and their messaging around electrification. They see they call it the ABB FormulaE Championship, right? They feel real ownership over the championship, and they see that as a really valuable platform for them to go and translate their message into the consumer market. Then when you imagine that they do their partnership with Shell, that's taking that to the next level, that you or I turn up to the Shell forecourt, now suddenly many of us, now having heard this, you probably in the next month, 6 weeks, when you pull into a Shell forecourt, you will now start to see the ABB sign, which previously maybe you would not have noticed because it wasn't a brand you were aware of. Yeah. So I think, from our perspective, enabling organisations to tell that message and to be a catalyst for progress and communication, and that's our big opportunity. And where we turn up and race is obviously a critical part of that. So we race in iconic cities around the world. You mentioned South Korea at the beginning. We raced in Seoul for the first time in August. We closed out our season there. Jakarta, actually a really interesting market. A lot of our partners weren't that excited about going to Jakarta, got there and oh my goodness, there's a lot going on here. Obviously a highly populous part of the world. Real climate problems. They're going to probably rebuild the capital city up in the mountains in the forest, because Jakarta itself is looking in danger. And when you look at Jakarta, for most people, the motor car's not a thing. It's about public transport and it's about the motorbike. But yet we go and race electric cars. It's still, that message is really powerful. So you see local government and national government really vested. They don't have many international sports that go there. So not only are we inspiring local people and bringing brands into Jakarta, we're also taking that content out and showcasing it around the world. So there's kind of this dual benefit to what we can do. So that's how we see our role. We need to turn up great sport, great locations, great marketing, and provide that powerful platform for people to be associated with.
There's another series now being started called Extreme E. And they're developing now a new car with a hydrogen fuel cell. So electric cars can be pumped with a battery pack or with other sources of energy, like hydrogen fuel cell. And by the way, that can give you an amazing range, 1,000 kilometers range. That hydrogen is a very expensive solution, but it does provide a huge range. Just to clarify. So not everything, and also FormulaE, by the way, the license that the FIA gave FormulaE allows them to not just do battery packs, but do any source of energy that allows to move an electric motor. All right, but there are solutions in the market already that provide long range. They're just a bit expensive, but they do provide
absolutely. Okay. Also, go on. No, go ahead.
Well, saying in the near term, what you might well see is, even if it's not a race car with a hydrogen fuel cell, because the weight and volume and stuff is probably not that racy right now, but the idea in terms of for street racing, but you can imagine being able to use that technology to showcase through one-off and marketing events and stuff. So there's lots of opportunity for us to go and have fun with. As I say, I think we've got to be on this real acceleration of the S-curve now in terms of research and development and the opportunities that will create.
Absolutely. Right, I want to throw this open to the floor. If anyone has any questions, do we have the microphone? Helen? Sorry, bear with me. Slow off the starting grid. If you can go towards the back there, actually. I think the gentleman there with his hand up, put his hand up first, if we can take his question. If you can just state your name and where you're from, please, before you take the question.
Thank you.
Hi, Martin from Pure Fuel. You mentioned infrastructure is really important and government's putting infrastructure into trying to transition over to EV, but obviously you touched on lots of points about people, EV not being taken up in the public space. So do you see it as like a sort of cultural issue or more of a legislative issue as, government's pushing more people to buy EVs, or does it have to be more of a sort of a marketing ploy, in layman terms?
Go on, you go.
Well, in my opinion, as I said before, OEMs are just not ready. As simple as that. So if all the advertisements that OEMs are doing today, it's about their electric vehicles, but you try to buy them and you can't get them. So I think the industry is far behind. I mean, they're getting ready. I mean, CATL is building two huge mega factories in Mexico just to supply Tesla for North America. I mean, Volkswagen is doing a 3 billion factory in southern Spain. I mean, they're getting ready, but they're just far behind, 3-4 years.
Honestly, I think in 5 years' time, this conversation will be totally different. There'll be a whole range of fleet cars coming on the market, which means it's affordable for us to go and search on Cinch and find a car for something between 10 and 15 grand that we can afford that's all electric. That's just not the case at the moment. So supply, proliferation of models that satisfy what we need, second-hand cars coming on the market will be really important, and infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think I heard, and it might be right or not, but the around 60% of CO2 emissions on the roads are done by public transportation. So if if London says now all my buses gotta be BYD, BYD doesn't have 2,000 buses to supply to London next year. Impossible. In the whole history of BYD, I think the export was like 5,000 buses in the last 10 years, which is a ridiculous number. Only Manila, the city of Manila in the Philippines, has 60,000 buses. So the numbers are crazy, So the OEMs, they just need to get ready, and it's going to take a bit of time.
So it sounds like the desire is there from the consumer, but the manufacturers maybe don't have the same appetite. Is that fair?
I think they were only China was really, they foresaw that there was a massive opportunity, and they had a massive CO2 emissions problem. Mm-hmm. But I think we're just slow. Mm-hmm. I mean, the only guy that has been really a fast mover was Elon Musk. That's the only guy that you could tell that he was really pushing, but still, they're a very small company still. And there is a lot of things that come along with the electric car. The electric car is always connected to a software, and so generating a lot of information. Mm-hmm. So that's going to help a lot to autonomous drive. There's going to be a massive. I foresee also a massive problem when it comes to autonomous driving, because the key on when you go to talking about public transportation, if you look at the cost of an electric bus versus a combustion bus, electric bus a good BYD 12-meter bus could be like €500,000, whilst a normal 12-meter combustion bus could be 200,000. So 200,000, they last for 10 years, that's 20,000 a year. Electric vehicle is $500,000, so it's 50K a year depreciation. The direct labor cost in London for one bus is £200,000 a year. You need 2.5 drivers per vehicle. The cost of a vehicle doesn't mean anything when you depreciate that within 10 years. The direct labor is really what's very costly. So autonomous drive, that's also going to make that's like my biggest personal bet to put on the stock market and just invest into that, because electric vehicles can save, they can save money on CO2 or something, but really the cost driver for public transportation is direct labor. So.
Okay, well, look, autonomous vehicles and autonomous driving sounds like a session for our next show. So, Miguel, we'll get you back for a session for that one, for sure. But we are pretty much out of time, actually. I'm sorry we really don't have time for your questions. I'm sure if you have some questions, hopefully these guys might be having a drink or something in the networking area. Sure. Please do grab them. But that's all we've got time for. So please, big thank you to Miguel and Hannah. Thank you, guys. Thank you.